Hi there, I'm Sam Bhagwat, co-founder of Gatsby and now principal engineer at Netlify. I'm here with Richard Mogendorff, who is the CTO of Like Digital, an agency in London that helps e-commerce and hospitality brands undergo digital transformation through composable architecture. Richard, thanks for being here and great to have you.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you, Sam.
Okay, so let's dive into some of these things. Can you sort of talk a little bit about your background and share a little bit about your background, how Like Digital sort of started and the types of projects that Like works on?
100%, yeah. So Like Digital, we were formed in London in around 2011. We originally were working on the boom at the time in mobile sites. So we all came from e-commerce. We came very much originally from the fashion and apparel aspect. So mobile was a thing at first, but I think we learned early to change with the times, to recognize changes in technology trends and experiential trends and work with those and assimilate those into our workflows.
What was your background? Can you before you started Like?
So my personal background, I was consulting in the digital world really for about 20 years now. So back in the days when e-commerce platforms didn't really exist in the same way for the lower mid-market. So we used to build it from scratch in those days. We built out the entire thing, which was a lot of learnings. And also some work across the music industry and a fashion startup as well, so a tech fashion startup.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen so much technological change from build it yourself to sort of, select the best platform to now kind of find the best pieces and kind of make your own platform again.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think so jumping forward to the nearer future, we work very much on the monolithic world. We were fully committed to monolith for several years. And when we became aware of what we now call composable, we made a really firm strategic decision to move to that across the entire business. We moved from build your own to use what's out there, and certain very good platforms where you had to do it their way and you needed to have every piece of the block provided by that provider. So yeah, we made that move across the agency about 4+ years ago now to SaaS. And then as the things like the Mac Alliance came online, we kind of absorbed their values and we built that into our workflow.
What was the first project that you built in this new way?
I believe it was on the first one we did, knowing that we were doing it in this way, particularly because of course we did some smaller ones before. Yeah. But I'd say it was probably La Perla, who are an Italian luxury lingerie company. We did their global sites on BigCommerce. This is early 2020, so we had a very short time scale to release 13 global sites from Japanese to the UAE, to the US. And that was making the full use of the BigCommerce kind of SaaS ecosystem there.
And what was it that made you sort of decide to build in that way?
I think it was value to our clients. So as an agency, we used to have rooms full of developers keeping the lights on a monolithic platform, and that was fine, but it didn't feel like we were really giving the value we wanted to give to our clients. I think specifically we work on in terms of mutual success and revenue growth for the client, etc. So when they're paying a retainer for a team of developers to fix bugs and patch things, it doesn't really move forward as much as we'd like. So that was one of the key drivers. We saw in SaaS, it coincided with us putting together a luxury first content team as well, who were very much integrated with our UX UI development.
Tell me about that. What do you mean by a luxury first content team?
So that grew out of some of our longer term clients. For example, the Macallan whiskey, if you're a whiskey drinker. But part of their remit really is, a client isn't just someone who buys the product one time over. A client is an international traveler, tends to have in the luxury market, tends to have an international lifestyle, wants the best of what they can get in terms of experience whenever they travel, etc., and is obviously potentially money rich but time poor as well. So if I'm traveling to New York City and I'm only there for 2-3 days, and I have a little bit of leisure time, I want to go to the best place and have the best experience, or if I'm taking guests out, etc., etc.
Yeah. So you sort of built a content team around sort of creating these types of content around the target customer of your client.
100%, and it's localization with a level of intelligence behind it. So I think an example at the time was if I'm a US traveler in France, then I'm going to want to see content that's relevant for me as a US traveler in France, or if I'm a Russian traveler coming to UK, etc. So there's quite a lot of nuance there, and also depending where I'm at on my CX journey as well, how engaged I am, what type of am I a collector? Am I a consumer of the product, etc.? Am I gifting this? So it needs to be very kind of sensitive with that.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing is kind of a focus on the overall user journey that kind of goes beyond what is the best tool, for this particular function, and really diving into the specific use case of like what type of person they are, like where are they going to be, kind of like what emotional association do they want to associate with the brand, and what types of things do we need to provide as part of that experience.
Absolutely correct. And the thing that doesn't sit so well with that is, for want of a better term, back-end technology. So the client wants to talk about enhanced experience and all these things. They don't want to go, I wonder how the latest server upgrade went and things like that. Even though it's super important, they notice when it breaks. But that's the thing.
Let's kind of talk through some of the parts of your journey. So you sort of take on like these kind of boutique clients and brands, really like premium luxury. You sort of go from there to, hey, we need a new stack or a different stack that like better serves them. We may need to make other changes in our business model, provide sort of other services to help, our clients kind of be successful and like help their customers sort of journey feel right. Walk me through another couple of like steps along that journey for you.
For sure, yeah. I think a great case was when the brand La Perla, when they launched their beauty brand, and they had some quite different requirements in terms of the internationalization was really key. Different markets had different products. Because they were selling perfumes, some countries classed that as dangerous goods. They also had very specific, in the beauty world, you can have 100 ingredients related to a single product, and they can be very scientific, etc. So they wanted to use BigCommerce as a platform, which made a lot of sense anyway. But we decided that on that particular case, headless was the way to go for sure, 100%. And with BigCommerce in the background, we then chose, we were looking for a CMS that would help them with internationalization, that would help us to be super flexible in the models and associations. So as and when they, a library of 1,000 ingredients that they want to associate on the fly with different products and things like that. So quite bespoke product models and enrichment. And a super flexible hosting environment where we could really quickly deploy new environments, etc., and localize that. So in that particular case, we chose Contentstack as our CMS, and the natural flow actually with that was obviously Gatsby. So we had BigCommerce through Gatsby into Contentstack, and then Netlify as a hosting environment, and hooked it up ridiculously quickly compared to the old monolithic world, and it worked very well for us. And I think. It's interesting because it was very much developer led. The developers came to us when we asked, like, okay, how do you want to do this? What does best in class look like for you? And this was the most popular answer that came back in terms of stack. So
that's great. I mean, from an industry perspective, it's interesting. A couple of years ago, I talked to an agency that worked on the Stripe Act-In website with another beauty brand with Gatsby and Netlify. And for them, it was they wanted before and after pictures with skincare. Because that was sort of the part of the content model where they were like, okay, like we need to move outside the box of what the default e-commerce experience is going to give us, and then move to something more headless, composable with a custom front end, and like an ability to just craft that kind of experience.
I fully agree. Yeah, and it comes back to that word experience again, and I suppose with the client understanding the flexibility of a system like Contentstack, or similar systems on that level, when they've been perhaps more used to a monolithic way of working, that's great. And when they need a new country stroke environment stroke language, locale, etc., they're always surprised to see that this tends to be a configuration job as opposed to a development job. And I think with our full move to the whole composable world, well, initially to the whole SaaS world, it was very much about that. Can we configure it? Can we use the best of what's out the box and configure it as opposed to, lots of development that way?
100%. So I think some of the people listening to this are going to be a tech lead or maybe a director at at another agency, perhaps similar to Like, and they're or maybe inside a potential client or a larger company. And a question that I hear a lot is sort of when I found these kind of technologies, I have kind of a sense of like how this kind of hangs together, but then I need to get the buy-in of sort of like business stakeholders. Can you share sort of the story of how the project went from, and the technology stack that you selected went from something, the engineering team found to something that you were completely bought in as an agency and, brought kind of the client on board as well?
Very good question. Yeah. So while we had at one end of the chain, we had those sort of recommendations coming in from technology. In the meantime, our BA team was working very closely with the client team to make sure that we'd captured all the requirements. And that was really a number of those requirements were practitioner led as well. So it's about how they wanted to use the systems and feel empowered by them. And including, of course, roadmap. And then we matched those together on a score basis against different systems and criteria, etc. And I think in terms of business buy-in, we were able to just clearly demonstrate it was very, very black and white. You can see clearly where this matches and how these systems were working in that way. So it was a good way of getting that buy-in. I think the other thing is we did our research against, for example, Mac Alliance and how they recommend the operationally how this can work. And one of the things that comes to mind was when we're choosing these kind of best-in-class tools together, as far as the business is concerned, they can see a clear division of responsibility between partners. You get a SaaS contract that's pre-secure that's going to work there. You have a best-in-class tool, say like Netlify, where we can get really clear audit logs on bills. We can trigger with webhooks easily. And as they start to understand those, then they'll understand the power of it.
It's fascinating. You essentially gave them an architecture diagram. Maybe it's a little bit more than an architecture diagram because you probably had yourselves in there as well from like but sort of like, here's the architecture diagram. Here are the contracts that you'll need, and here are the different pieces of the puzzle to make this work.
Very much so, yeah. And that we actually showed them two diagrams. One which was the monolithic way, which of course has its place, but for them in this case it wasn't the right thing. And we showed clearly in this stack you've got all these existing things and you have no choice. In your case, you need a much more flexible CMS. And in their current hosting world, they had the issue where, as many do, where you have a spike in traffic or Black Friday, you need to pre-prepare. Those are those old school things. Yeah, exactly. We've all been there. But in this case, we were able to say, but look, in this new world, yes, you have separated items, but typically they connect together out of the box anyway. So it's not like you need to engineer anything particularly clever to make them work together. And it's really about configuring and preparing that way, which is always a good answer. But the other thing is about the roadmap and about the commitment, I think, for business to make. And they can understand that, yeah, we can start on a CMS, for example, of this level. But if we find that we grow according to our targets, then in 2024 we can move to this system. And yes, it's possible to move. We always say, well, that while the plane's in flight, you can change the engines, and they're designed to do that. So.
How has your journey into composable, mock, Jamstack, Netlify, headless CMSs, how has that journey impacted your journey as a company?
So we had to make the conscious decision to do it, and then we had to roll it out across the team. We had to help the different departments understand how that worked. I think one of the big ones was shifting to a fully component-based architecture from the UX and design teams, and implementing Storybook, for example, into our day-to-day workflow. So that Storybook enables the client stakeholder teams to really understand their components and how they can use them, especially if we're building in complex configuration to those components, which is often the way. So in a group scenario, we're building them to be, yes, they're React components, but we're building them to be multi-brand inherently. So we had to make sure that the coordinated teams understood that. So in that case, I think it's probably the best example where the technology is not standing in the way. The technology is enabling creative teams to really bring that forward as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating that you saw almost like a consolidation benefit of using these technologies, where these technologies are helping you collaborate and coordinate across the various parts of your organization.
Very much so, yeah. It's the other point where they become useful is where where we're building middleware, where we typically, of course, in the older days, we always build a custom middleware. And nowadays we have choice. There's some really nice iPaaS tools out there. I think Patchworks have made huge leaps and bounds in that area, for example, with again, a sort of low-code configurable tool with a lot of pre-connections built in. But where we do have to do something more bespoke, where it's a Node app or something like that, even then, because these in the composable Mac world, things are so API first, it's fantastic inherently. So you know that the team can connect with the APIs and work with them that way. The other big one, really, I think, is GraphQL has been brilliant for us as well. So we find that to be super useful. I think Gatsby's pretty strong with GraphQL as well, isn't it?
We love GraphQL. We love it so much. We wanted to bring the GraphQL layer that we built to the whole the whole composable world, which is another story. But
it's so useful in practice for us, and the amount of times when we're we've got an example is we've got a headless site where all the content enrichment's coming through CMS, but then we're doing a live stock lookup for a really super fast moving product that comes from a completely separate system. Based on the products on the page, it's perfect for GraphQL because we're just querying based on what we've got right there and then what we need. So some of those use cases are essential. We can do without it. So it's great.
So I'm really curious about the ingredients that you mentioned. How do you set up the tagging and filtering system? And can you just walk through how it's useful to to users and customers of your clients?
In terms of the sort of unique tagging of products themselves,
you mentioned that. So I think it was earlier in the conversation that you had sort of a filtering system where you kind of figured out a product had 100 unique ingredients and you were able to display them in a way.
Of course, yeah, 100%, yeah. Okay, so on that particular side, so we had to do an initial product association between BigCommerce in this case and Contentstack. So there is a connector now, but at the time we used Contentstack's inbuilt. I forget exactly what it's called, but we could script within Contentstack to build that association, which revealed it within a field, which was great. So we had basically the association between the BigCommerce ID and the record within Contentstack in this case, and then we enriched the product on that basis. And as the product evolved, we were able to add extra fields, obviously, into that. Whereas a SaaS tool like BigCom or Shopify, etc., you can change the base product model, or you can to an extent, but not with this much flexibility. But we were able to really enrich the product model on CMS, which was very useful. And as we got to the ingredients, we basically created a separate data model within Contentstack for ingredients. And in this case, for memory, we had the scientific name, which could be massive, the friendly name, some key ingredients. We could have images and things, etc. as well. And then we did an association between the product, where we allowed the practitioner to choose the sort of top ingredients on a pull-down list, but the rest we did via API, because having a practitioner sit there and select 1,000 different things was not really an option. So they provided us with CSVs of the associations, and we ran them through a job to use the Contentstack API to associate, which was pretty straightforward. And it's another good example of where using API-first tools can make these sorts of large jobs just straightforward and fairly good fun as well.
I think there's another interesting thing, which is tabular data, right? We often don't have a clear sense of what to do with tabular data just because we don't need to think about what to do with it until we do. But, how do you get do you have like some spreadsheet that you edit? Does that get pulled in somehow? How do you get your CSVs into your system? Maybe you can just run like this one-off kind of script job to, associate them with the model, right? And thinking about how we ingest that I've seen that for like retail store locators, for example, another use case that like I've seen it for. Can you walk through from like a user perspective what did like why was this feature valuable, or like what was useful about it
in terms of association of
yeah, like why did the users like why was it helpful for people to see the ingredients?
Okay, so number one, there's actually a requirement, I think, in the beauty world where you have to be able to see what's involved, which is a good one. And the second one, I think, just in terms of just backing up emotionally for the buyer to see, okay, this is all natural. This is the provenance of it as well, and this is sort of carefully curated and chosen in that way. So it's twofold.
How were other folks handling that regulatory requirement? Were there like other like possibilities that you considered?
Yeah, with difficulty, I'd say. So we actually have done something similar before, and the way we did it was with just complex tables on the page and asking people. This is quite a few years before, when I think the only option was a WYSIWYG editor, and they would build an HTML table and copy and paste the code in, and hard to edit, difficult, prone from easy to make mistakes, etc. And I think the issue there is if one ingredient needs to be changed, there's a spelling mistake, etc., they need to go and change it on every single page.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You sort of took this regulatory requirement and actually made it into a feature that customers would really like, as opposed to, sort of like those like essentially like a long product disclosure, where it's like, this text in like 6-point fonts and like hard to read, but like it has to be there, and like people are like can't really use this, and you sort of like flipped it around and turned it. So like, why not?
100%. Yeah, it's funny because we're then able to make other features that they could use, like just a searchable ingredients list and things like that. So it's super easy once it's in there. So I think it's the ability to create these objects and these models with relative ease within these new tools, and then everything is on the API. Anything can be pulled out into a JSON object and manipulated from there, and all developers understand how that works. So it's kind of bringing things into a common language where people feel pretty empowered to work with it. I come from the older database world, and I feel quite empowered by writing database queries, to be honest. And I think that's the thing, but it's less that thing nowadays. But
it's interesting, right? Because like at its core, right, a headless CMS like Contentstack is sort of a database that you can edit. You can change the schema. You can associate objects with each other, and one-to-many or many-to-many relationships, and you can do your database design, and there's probably a whole conversation around there, but.
And you can change it on the fly more than you would be probably reasonably expected to in the old days. And that's the other thing, as the customer requirements change, you can say, yes, we can create a new data type and we can associate it with this or that. So,
yeah. I guess so switching kind of like this is great diving into there. Switching to sort of like industry wide, can you like walk through some of the different like industries that you sort of and like work with, and just different sort of like trends that you see across those industries, in terms of how they're seeing, the composable architecture?
100%, yeah. I think I'll start off with the hospitality world. So what's interesting there is we've worked in, for example, the luxury members club space for quite a number of years, and very well served by some very, very much for-purpose tools, which tended to be on-premise, tended to be fairly monolithic. And you really would have the situation where you'd have a massive tool that would do so many different things. So getting anything in the feature request list would take ages, and you were quite locked down to what that gave you and how you did it. But now we've seen a good, really positive move into certainly in the Mac world, if not fully composable world there, but where you've got some really good SaaS tools that begin to talk to each other quite nicely. In the old days, if you wanted to, you're a member in a members club, or you're staying in a hotel and you want to go and pay on the till at the point of sale, it wouldn't necessarily be able to associate a member ID or a customer ID with the larger systems. So they're not able to understand how they're not able to understand so well how you interact with the business, or to have a single point of payment, etc. But the tools are coming there quite rapidly, and the hospitality businesses are getting more and more used to being led by what the practitioners are saying. So a operational person will say, yes, I use, for example, 7 Rooms as a tool, and we're really used to using it. It works well. My staff can use it. And then IT will go, okay, let's see how this will talk to our wider world. And I see that as a real positive, because ultimately the customer's winning and the team who are on the front line win as well. So very much that's being embraced there. And of course, you're finding smaller and smaller tools doing very specific things, and doing them very well. So, and then in e-commerce as well, what's very interesting again is, and in the ecosystems of Shopify, BigCommerce, etc., the one-click app install thing is very empowering. And there's some great tools around, for example, with loyalty and subscription. Whereas 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, we'd have to build that from scratch. There's so many sub journeys for users there, failed cards, declined cards, out of date cards, etc. Different subscriptions, pausing subscriptions, etc. Points against, and you've got some great tools that just plug in and work now, and they work well with all the downstream systems. So I think the fact that we're seeing tools appear in that way is great. But I think in terms of the composable world, those tools are now maturing to actually make APIs and make core functionality available. So when you are starting to build out headless or sort of smaller apps for, say, kiosk, for in-store, etc., they know that you're going to be inherently multi-channel as well.
So when you talk about e-commerce, what do you see as the different types of e-commerce that you sort of work more closely with, or and like, do you see any kind of variable adoption of composable technologies in different kinds of e-commerce?
Very much so. I think it's the interesting thing now. It's very much led in a good way by global customer experience. So more and more brands saying that my customer isn't just someone who's based in France or Canada or wherever it might be. My customer is someone who travels, who wants to be able to order to their home or their friends here or there, or order as they travel. So therefore, it becomes inherent that the site can be multi-language, multi-currency, etc., but also sensitive to different regions and promotions and timescales and things like that. So that requirement comes through much more. And I think what's exciting is the e-commerce teams themselves are far more mature and aware of what the tools in the marketplace can do. So that helps us drive forward. And they also more and more will understand the benefits of headless, because their remits will be, as I say, kiosk, in-store, app, social, etc. They understand that what they need so they understand what they need in terms of multi-channel from the start, and about reusing content, etc. So that's a really exciting place for us because we're having quite inspiring conversations with clients in newer conversations.
I mean, and it's interesting what you're saying in that it's almost the more complex a client's business is, the multi-region, multi-language, multi-channel, the more they're looking to these new technologies to help them manage that complexity.
Very much so, yeah, very much so. And I think they're aware that they can use the best of breed in different positions and bring them in as they need them, and that's really exciting. It's a really good way of thinking as well.
Like where do you start if you're looking into these technologies? Where do you start?
Very good question. It depends what it is. So if it's a customer-facing tool, then we'll of course we'll break it down by the original requirements, by the user journeys, user experience, etc. So I think in terms of subscription, we'll really look at who is the customer, why would they subscribe, what do they get from it, what are the benefits to them, how does this fit in with the experience in the product, and we'll look at, obviously mostly it's primarily mobile, but what will they be doing, assuming it's on mobile, what will they be doing at the time? Are they walking around the mall with one hand on the phone, or are they actually concentrated at home on something? So these things help us decide in the first place what the tool will be. If it's a business-facing tool, then again, we tend to be practitioner-led again nowadays. So who will actually be using this in the business and why, and how do they need to be empowered by it? But there's always an underpinning of the sort of infrastructure world, so data security, data sovereignty, of course, speed and security, etc.
Yeah, and I think this is maybe a good sort of final topic to dive into, which is that, it's clear that the Like team is, super technology forward, that they're sort of aware of how to use technology, not just for technology's sake, but to drive like better results in the business. How have you built that kind of team over time? And if you want to sort of, increase the savviness of, for folks in organizations that want to kind of move their team in that direction or bring in folks with that kind of background, like what sort of tips would you have for that kind of person?
Yeah, very good question. I think what we insist of and always have insisted of our team is a curious mind. So whenever we interview, we're always trying to find out what drives them as a person outside of design, engineering, whatever they might do. But it's also about their collaboration and keeping them focused on that North Star of the user experience, the practitioner experience. That's two North Stars, but we'll brush over that one. But I think it's, and always taking the conversations back to that and helping the departments to work together on these tasks. So it makes for example, something like multi-language, multi-currency with specific locale and stock for a particular region, which sounds fairly straightforward, but letting the team creatively break down the nuances of that. If you have the right sort of people, they'll enjoy kind of mapping out all the possibilities, and they'll find those little edge cases that make a huge difference architecturally in terms of how you use the tools. And I think just the whole component-based approach, adopting that is really powerful because the teams can't help but understand it once they understand how components fit together and how to design, within that whole flow. It's a really empowering thing on that side.
For sure. I imagine it also probably doesn't hurt to have, a CEO that kind of dives into the technical details and how the GraphQL API gets used to pull in, content from different types of data sources and such.
Very much so. We like an API, maybe a little bit too much, but there's a lot of dabbling in Postman and things like that, and it's quite an empowering way, I think, at the start of a project as well to go, okay, we think we can do that, but then actually allowing ourselves some creative time to play with the APIs and map things together is a lot of fun, actually.
I feel like the last few years we were kind of like figuring out what all the different pieces are, and now we're kind of like figuring out how to like integrate them together, and then like how to just deploy them and like the workflows and like just optimizing the user and customer experience.
I agree completely, and I really enjoy that aspect of it. I like that there's no manual for this, and
Yeah.
there's no university course right now, and exactly how this is all working. I like that open research, creative side of it. It's really exciting.
It is, yeah. And I think a lot of the times, you as a agency owner and CTO, you sort of end up being we at some point as like vendors, we don't necessarily know what the best practices are, except as what we ask you, like, how did you deploy these technologies? What did you use together? Tell us about the architecture. Tell us about how the customer reacted. And like, we have some of that knowledge, but we really get the knowledge from you, because you are sort of on the front lines.
And we get it from our customers, and we get it from the real problems that they have. And I think there's kind of a trend in a project where you're everything's going like that, and then there's one person in a room who's got some very specific knowledge that will come in sort of 75% through the project, and they'll unlock some whole new thing. And those are the points where we really learn, because we know we have to find the best way to make this work for everyone involved, and it's great. So there's always that little burst of adrenaline at that point. It's good.
No, exactly. Like, I think that, like, I mean, I feel like every few months we just start seeing something more and more. Like, I've been hearing more and more about agencies kind of like deploying Storybook in really interesting ways across customers, within customers, as a communication tool between their engineers and their client's content team. Like, we hear like, and like, will like walk us through the workflow. They'll show us how they use Storybook in like building landing pages. I've just been hearing like more and more of that for whatever reason in the last 6 months than I'd heard kind of before.
Fully agree. Yeah. So it's the cross team sort of creative aspect of it, and yeah, the best way to use the tools. It's so exciting. Even the likes of Figma nowadays, as we switch there, and there's new tools appear regularly. We have to find a way to evaluate these, and everything seems to be the next best thing. But I love the whole community aspect of this is exciting, and I'm spend far too much time on Twitter, but looking at the latest WebGL trends, the latest kind of Figma plugins, things like that. It's terrifying. There's some very, very smart people out there, and when they work together, it's great.
No, I mean, and it's amazing. I mean, like we're kind of like, we're all figuring out what the next experience of the web is going to like look like, sort of together. And I don't know, GitHub had this like spinning globe a while ago that they built in WebGL, and I was just looking at it and I was like, that is gorgeous. Like, how do we get that experience on, like, how do we make that into like a React library or something, and we can like, just make it available for more people to plug in their pages.
Yeah, it's the tiny things, but it makes a huge difference, to the day-to-day use.
I don't know. Anything else that we should have talked about or I should have asked you about that'd be fun to mention?
Not that I can think of right now. But yeah, no, thanks. This is really good fun. Thanks. Really nice to meet you as well.
It's great to meet you as well. Yeah, hopefully we get the chance to chat in the future, and I'll let you know if I'm in the UK.
Please do. Yeah, I shall gladly buy you a very, very nice, very large beer if you make it.
Sounds good. Well, I'm preemptively looking forward to it whenever it's
nice one.